When I went back home to tell my wife, she was surprised too. But we had been prepared for it because she knew I was part of this process. I can do exactly the same kind of economics work in the private sector too, and they are paying better. So the thought did cross my mind, maybe I should just leave and join a private sector, maybe a bank. But at that time, I also had very good bosses in the civil service. Boon Wan was very careful. He didn't let on at all who might have emerged from the process. Not at all. I mean, he was interviewing me. I told him my views. He listened. He asked me some questions. And then at the end of it, he said, there is a consensus emerging. And that's all. So I didn't think very much of it because my view throughout that process was let the process run its course. The team will choose. I didn't know who it might be. I didn't care to probe. And Boon Wan was very careful. He didn't tell anyone. The only time I knew was at the tail end of the process when he had pretty much completed his rounds. And then when he told me, PM and him told me that I had been selected. So naturally, at that time, I was surprised. When I went back home to tell my wife, she was surprised too. But we had been prepared for it because she knew I was part of this process. And we knew that going into this, we would accept the outcome of the process. And if this is the result, then I would step up and I would take on the responsibility. When I started working, I was an economist in the Ministry of Trade and Industry. I had been rejected by the Public Service Commission to be in the administrative service, so I wasn't involved in a lot of policy work. I can do economics work in the government. I can do exactly the same kind of economics work in the private sector too, and they are paying better. So the thought did cross my mind, maybe I should just leave and join a private sector, maybe a bank. But at that time, I also had very good bosses in the civil service. Boon Wan happened to be my first permanent secretary in MTI, and then Lim Siong Guan in finance. And they persuaded me to stay on. After a while, I got involved in working in budgets. I got involved in working in policy work. I got involved in even going out into the community to explain budget initiatives. And I found all of that very meaningful because that's the kind of work I wouldn't have been able to do in the private sector. So I decided I don't have to leave. In fact, I didn't want to leave. I stayed on. And each time, as I stayed on in the public service, each responsibility I got became progressively larger and larger. The work never shrinks. The work just gets bigger and bigger. And when in 2011, when Prime Minister Lee invited me to enter politics, I said, look, this is my calling. I've decided that being in public service is what I would like to do. And so I saw entering politics as a continuation of that. I started out as a Minister of State. I mean, there was a adjustment to be made, but I knew what I was getting myself into. I had worked with many office holders in the past as a civil servant. I knew what the job entailed, and I was prepared for it. From a minister to a prime minister, yes, you are first amongst equals, but I had seen also how much the scale of responsibilities, what it entailed, and what was involved in this job. It's not just about one ministry, one GRC. Now you're talking about national responsibilities, leading the party into election. So it was a much bigger role. I am taking Malay language lessons. I'm doing it as best I can every week. It's not something only now. I've been doing it off and on ever since for some time, even before then as a civil servant, I did a little bit conversational as a civil servant. And then after entering politics, I also continued with it. But now, ever since the appointment as DPM, already close to 2 years, I've been taking the lessons more seriously too, because I do want to engage more in Malay, speak in Malay. So it's a continuing process. I think to be able to deliver a speech, it's something I can do. To be fluent and be able to engage completely in Malay, I think that will be much, much harder. But never say never. I'll just keep on working at it and trying to get better. I also continue with Mandarin lessons. In the last 1 or 2 years, probably not as frequently as Malay, because I've had to bring up my Malay to a better level, so focusing on Malay, but I do continue with my Mandarin lessons from time to time. With Mandarin, it's different. It's not so much about learning a language from very low levels. With Mandarin, after all, I've studied Mandarin in school all my life. Also struggled with studying Mandarin in school all my life, but I have had the foundations in me. It's just that I didn't have the benefit of growing up in a family environment where we speak Mandarin regularly. So it's very interesting, because when I compare with some friends who have that kind of an environment, they are more confident in speaking Mandarin on a day-to-day basis. Yet, when we talk about writing and reading and understanding of words, somehow my foundations are better than theirs, because I took Mandarin classes seriously. I studied Mandarin seriously, and so therefore my reading, writing, the foundations are all there. So to me, with Mandarin, it's about just using it more regularly. It's about gaining confidence over time. Using it not just on a conversational basis. With my residents, it's not difficult to do that on a conversational basis, but to start using it, going beyond that conversational Mandarin, to using it for work, using it for interviews. So that's a higher level of, or that's my next phase in my Mandarin journey, and I hope I will continue to get better at it. If you look at the last election results, there are quite a number of hotly contested seats. And if you were to take not just the Workers' Party, but one or two other opposition parties, if in the next election the contest is fiercer and we were to lose just a few percentage points, it is not unimaginable for 2 or maybe 3 opposition parties to come together, form a coalition, and run the government, get more than 50%. Not at all unimaginable. And that's why when I said that I do not assume the PAP will win the next election, or that I will automatically be the PM after the election, I say that seriously. This is the reality of our political situation today. It is no longer a dominant system, one-party system. It is a system where there are alternative voices in Parliament, where there are diverse views that can be heard on any issue, and it's a system where there is consent, but there has to be a mandate and effective governance for whoever is given the mandate. That's what we hope to preserve, that this will continue to be a system where a mandate is given to the ruling party, and the ruling party is able to govern Singapore in the best interest of its people. But if along the way, who knows how long, but down the road, if we hope this will not happen, but if it does happen, that the PAP is not able to deliver up to the standards that Singaporeans expect of us, and an alternative party or parties emerge that can offer a better answer, then they deserve to get the mandate. But so long as it's under my watch, I will do everything I can to make sure that the PAP earns the confidence and trust of Singaporeans. In the US, when I was in college, we would take classes on political leadership, on US presidents, and then you read about whether it's Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, and I remember one of the books I read on Eisenhower and what he had said about leadership that always remains with me. He talked about leadership as, he distilled leadership into two things. One, knowing what to do, and two, getting people to do what is the right thing. And it sounds very simple, but actually there's a lot of wisdom in that. First, you need to know what to do. Knowing what to do doesn't mean that the leader must have all the answers, but certainly the leader can listen to advice, get views, but eventually the leader must say this is the way forward, because if you are not even able to articulate and express this way forward, then there's no need for a leader to exist. So knowing what to do is important, but the second part is equally important. You have decided after a process or whatever it is, this is the best way forward. How do you get everyone to come around to agreeing with you and bringing everyone on the same page and say, let's move this way? That's not easy to do too. That requires communication, it requires persuasion, it requires ways to inspire people, engage people, motivate them, and get everyone on the same page. And that's just as important. Otherwise, the leader will be charging alone. So I think thinking through these two aspects of leadership, how it's actually manifested and how best to bring to bear such leadership skills in every situation is something that has always remained with me. As far as my leadership style is concerned, I will be open, consultative, I will listen, but in the end, I will not shirk from doing the right thing and the important decisions that are necessary to take Singapore forward. So that's how I would describe myself. I don't know if that means iron fist in velvet gloves or whatever other metaphor you want to use, but I think over time Singaporeans will get a better sense of me and my leadership style, and these things will play out and time will tell. I don't have to write my legacy today. I think hopefully at the end of my time and my tenure, I will leave people to write my legacy and what kind of a Prime Minister I am.